It's going to be a little different today. I'm going to explore my various gear as I've gotten to know it pretty well over the past month with Jamuary. And just as a general note, all the jams are in the Jamuary 2022 playlist. You can check them out. This video will serve as sort of a retrospective thoughts as well as a rig rundown, talking through each section of the gear, how it was used, some pros and cons, and things that I learned. Alright, so I'll start with, I guess, the retrospective aspect. When I saw the prompt list for Jamuary on Reddit synthesizers, I thought that would be a great place to start, because if I just had sort of been left to my own decisions about jams, they probably would have been very similar. And even with the prompt, they kind of were, but at least it gave me a sort of a goal, a sort of an idea of where to end up. So generally the prompts let me treat each jam as a puzzle or a math problem to solve, with either my pedals or the Eurorack or with the Hydra. So it was a new configuration each day. How do I address this? And as I just mentioned, each sort of grouping allowed me to further narrow the scope. So if I had a prompt that may lend itself well to a certain grouping, it would make it easier. So like, for instance, the field recordings, that one made sense to do in the Eurorack, because that's sort of how I approach it with the tape and micro system. And then once I sort of had the idea, I would start tinkering around with the patch either the night before or the morning of that day. And for the most part, I did every single day. I did record. Some days I did bulk record a couple things. I think at most I had 3 days out. But then I would, stop for a couple days to let myself focus on work or other things. But the thing that really helped was sort of planning things out ahead of time, or the morning of, and taking lots of patch notes. So even if it was something with pedals where they're pretty much fixed, it would help to sort of define how it was being used, whether it was interacting with a MIDI clock or the MC6 or something. But especially for the Eurorack, just having all the patch notes there, so I can maybe even attempt to recreate them in some point in the future. So having those is really important. I knew one of the bigger hurdles potentially would be in the video aspect of this, because video editing isn't my favorite thing in the world. But it's a lot easier when you have shorter, more condensed videos. If you just do a 3-minute recording, it's a lot easier to edit, and it's way easier to edit when you don't have to do annotations. So that part really helped. In terms of filming, I used either my phone or a webcam camera, and I hooked it up to QuickTime. And I found that I was able to get good lighting, despite not having a lot of external lighting or good natural light coming in through the room that I'm using. But that can be edited using Resolve. So I learned Resolve very well over the past month, going into the color editing features, going into the DAW features, even though I used Logic for the recording and the mix mastering steps. Resolve has a VST import that you could just apply your effects and processing to the audio, so it works as a mini DAW. It's just a really useful piece of software that's free, which is excellent. And one that I probably should have started with is, I guess, going into this, it's sort of I decided to do this, but I didn't really have a plan until the 31st of December, because I got new headphones for Christmas, which was a big help. I was using the Audio-Technica ones. I got Sennheiser's, Barodynamic, the DT770s, and that made it way easier to like monitor and edit because the quality of the headphones and the materials was just so much better than I was used to. And then also, I bought the new Euro case, and it arrived like literally the day before, so I set it up real quick and had a first patch going that day that I would film for the first. And it was just a weird sort of like serendipitous thing. Yeah, so that was definitely very helpful. If I didn't have those two sort of like things at my disposal initially, it would have been harder, but I still would have done it. But it wouldn't have been as easy, and it wouldn't have been as motivating to do it every single day, because every single day was a lot. If I did this again, it'd probably be weekly, maybe a couple times a week, and perhaps for a longer period of time, but every single day for an entire month is a lot, because you have to plan out your patch, film, record, mix, master the audio so it's a good quality for YouTube or wherever it's going, edit it together, resolve, put up the patch notes in YouTube, and then post it wherever, socials. It's a lot of work, and it takes up some time. Yeah, but it was worth it. It was a really fun exercise, and one that I enjoyed the most. And in terms of like other benefits that it has had, it's made me get way better at playing the keyboard. If you notice sort of like the more Hydra focused ones, I think, at least personally, that towards the later on in the jams, I started to get more fluid in just playing and not having to like really think about it. I just would just like play across a different key or scale, and it would be pretty smooth. And for the most part, I didn't use any sort of quantizers or stuff on the Hydra specific stuff, for the Eurorack, or maybe for the iPad synths. I would throw on a quantizer just to save me some time, but I didn't find that I had to do that later on. So that was a big benefit. I still would like to do piano lessons or something more concrete, but for now I'm feeling a lot more confident on the keys. Yeah, so those are my retrospective thoughts. I guess I'll go through sort of each section. So we'll start with pedals. So for the pedals, it's kind of like two boards. The first board is, I guess, extras. It's weird to say that in context, but it's got a tuner, it's got the Empress Comp Mark II, it's got the Montreal Assembly pair in 856 and count to 5, and it's got a deco. So those are sort of like my extra effects that I'd like to use, but haven't really found a place in the main rig. So for most of the jams, that was sort of like the external piece. Either it would plug into the main board or it just wouldn't be used. But it's still pedals that I enjoy using and have fun using, especially the deco that I got recently, for that sort of saturation and tape flange. And then the main board is finally got completed with the MC6 and the Desessor MIDI box, so I would able to connect everything together and control it just from the one MIDI unit, which is huge. But yeah, the main sort of like components of that are like the Pretty Ears unit combo. So it allows me to do channel switching. So the clean channel on Una would be when that's activated. So that would like give me my most clean tone and whatever. And then when I would toggle it off, the Pretty Ears I put in the loop. So it would turn on the gain channel. So it allows me to switch between sort of like an amp selector mode while having the benefits of both the buffer and the Pretty Ears. And then it goes into really my most main used ones were the Tensor and the Thermae, and those really work well together because you can do like looping on the Tensor or weird reverse stuff, and then the Thermae is like my favorite analog delay ever. Then it goes into a couple more drives. I've got the Mini and the Siamese Nightmare op amp muff fuzz. So those are like for adding more gain after the delay or the Tensor. And then it goes into the Blooper, which I've recently given a second chance, and I'm enjoying it. but I don't know if it's a mainstay. I'm still working around the modifiers and how the loop container works, but it's a lot of fun. And then Particle, which is one of my favorites, it does basically everything that I want the Count to 5 to do, but it does it in stereo and with presets. So that was a really no-brainer there. And then the FUC is always on. Sometimes I'll turn on the crackle for sort of that like audio dropout. And then it goes into the ZOIA, which is, all around, all-purpose. Generally, I throw a reverb there, or I'll use maybe the Abyss Water patch or some other general-purpose EQing reverb thing, or some weird delay, just a wild card. And then it goes into the Zoom, which is really just a plate reverb and optional tremolo. It's basically icing as a flint. And then Iconoclast. Yes, that's for the pedals. I used every guitar except for my bass for Jamuary. And mostly the Reverend. Used the Les Paul a couple times, and then the Telly a few more times. Just personal preference on what I like playing. For the Hydra section, the synth section, it's the Hydrasynth keyboard. 49 keys, has ribbon, poly aftertouch. Really, really nice keyboard action and keys and everything. It's a really nice synth. Has a lot of great stock presets, has a lot of nice interactions with the mod matrix, has Eurorack CV in and out, just really, really flexible. So basically that when I'm playing a Hydra patch, that'll just be by itself in the mixer send, and then it'll go through a second ZOIA and an H9 if I want to add effects. So those two are in a stereo send on my mixer, so I can apply it to any one of the three categories really. But for the most part, it works with the Hydra. So if I want to add additional effects or loop a certain phrase, or play a MIDI keyboard, a MIDI synth on ZOIA from the Hydra keys, I can do that too. Yeah, I think my favorite thing about the Hydra is definitely its interactivity and its expression control, right? Because everything sort of works together. Like the poly aftertouch works really, really well. The ribbon works really, really well. And you can send that anywhere in the mod matrix, and you can send that externally over CV or MIDI for controlling other things. So it really opens a lot of potential for making that your main controller and then having it affect other things, which is what I've been doing. Right now I've got it hooked up to the ZOIA. Like I said, it's also going to the iPad setup, which works with the Eurorack, but I can also send it to Logic. I did a Logic one where I played a synth with a new plugin, which was something that I haven't done before. I played around with the Logic synths and that kind of setup, but I haven't really devoted a video or a recording to it. So that was a lot of fun. In terms of more sort of like Hydra Euro interaction, another cool thing that I used towards the end, especially in the last jam, is one thing that I don't think gets used very often is the mod inputs on the Hydra work as audio inputs as well. So you can route that through either the FM as a source or the ring mod, and you can use external samples or external synths as the Hydra oscillator, which is really, really cool. So you can like mix it with the internal timbres, or you can map it on different sections of the keyboard. It's just really, really nice. For the most part, I was taking in synths from the iPad. So I would play on the Hydra, which would control both the Hydrasynth patch and the iPad patch, whatever synth I was running, route it through the mod input, and then mix between the ring mod and the Hydra sound. Really, really cool. So moving on to the iPad section, / Euro section. So I consider them one and the same because of the way that I interface it with the ES9. But really, the iPad could be its own sort of like mini portable section. And for that, I use AUM as sort of the audio mixer and the MIDI host and where everything sort of lives. And some combination of Drambo, Avarillo, Factory, the Moog synths, plus some MIDI sequencers from the Rosetta suite. Sort of that combination usually is what comes out of the iPad and goes either through the Euro into the Euro effects, or through the Euro into the Hydrasynth, or just playing by itself. I did a couple iPad only jams as well. And then the last one, which is the newest thing, and something that I've been working on for like a year. I got my first Eurorack modules back in January of 21, and I spent an entire year with just the tape and micro system before I changed anything. And then December rolled around and I made changes. So right now it's a IntelliGel 7U84HP case. So it gives me 2 full rows and 1 mini row. Plus I've got the Euro Bureau, the ZBoo, and an O control, and then the iPad on the side. So it's sort of a hybrid mix of standalones, iPad, and traditional modules. It's mostly Mac noise based. It's got the whole tape and micro plus an reverb. I've moved some things out of the case, so I got rid of the XO, I got rid of the Tempe, and I added a couple other things. I added in the Pam's New Workout, which is a very flexible mod source and clock source. Highly recommended. I got a fader bank. So it's 16 faders with 16 CV ins and 16 CV outs, as well as MIDI connections. So it can be used as like a control surface for controlling a ZBoo patch, which is really, really useful. Or it can send CV in and then MIDI out, or MIDI in and CV out. It's a nice converter that way. It's just really handy to have like 16 faders to do whatever I want it to in the patch. So that's really useful. And then, what else is in there? So I've got the reverb, as I mentioned, really, really useful reverb and weird sound source. And then there's the ES9, which is doing sort of my multi-tracking. So it's got 14 inputs, which can either be audio or CV, and 8 dedicated outputs, plus the headphone and line out jacks. And that works with either the iPad when a USB-C is plugged in, or standalone. So in standalone mode, I just have it running as a basic mixer. It's a 8-channel stereo mixer. Really, really useful. And then up top there's a couple smaller modules from Visual Electronics and Quadrat for some CV utility stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Please let me know if you have any questions, and as always, check out the jams. I think they're really, really cool to see this sort of a progression over time. I'll probably be taking a little bit of a break because I did 32 videos in a month. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.